My sister's kid destroyed my 12K Gibson guitar and laughed. Family took his side. He's just a kid. She said I should forgive. I stayed quiet. The next day, I taught her husband the same lesson using his 100K Mercedes. The metallic tang of sardine oil, sharp and acrid, was the last thing I poured. It seeped into the air intake vents of the gleaming black Mercedes L65 AMG, promising a stench that would cling, permeate, and haunt its owner for weeks, perhaps months. This wasn't just about making a point, this was about ensuring the memory of that point lingered, just as the shattered image of my Gibson J200 was seared into my own mind. My hands, trembling slightly from adrenaline and a chilling sense of purpose, pulled back. The car, adorned with brightly colored, washable paint and dozens of Bologna slices, sat deflated on 4 flat tires in the pre-dawn quiet of my parents' driveway. It was 6:15 a.m. The world was still asleep, and I, for the first time in 24 hours, felt a strange, cold clarity. Believe it or not, this all started with a guitar, not just any guitar, mind you. This was my 1968 Gibson J200. I'd spent 3 years chasing that dream, working double shifts at the hospital, grabbing every overtime hour I could. $12,000. For some, that's a down payment on a car, a luxury vacation, or maybe even a small business venture. For me, it was the culmination of countless hours of sacrifice, a testament to my unyielding passion for music. That guitar, with its honey, burst finish, and the kind of sound that could resonate deep in your soul, wasn't just wood and wire. It was an extension of me. It was my sanctuary, my voice, my connection to a world beyond the sterile hospital corridors. My sister, Francesca, though she never quite understood, she lives in a different world, you see. Her husband, Quentin, is a hedge fund manager, the kind of man who wears watches that cost more than my annual salary and drives cars that I couldn't even dream of window shopping for. Their son, Adrian, my 10-year-old nephew, was the embodiment of that world. 3 iPads, a gaming rig that would make professionals jealous, designer clothes worn once and discarded. He existed in a bubble of consequence, free consumption, and honestly looking back, that was a huge, blaring red flag I probably should have paid more attention to. The family gathering at my parents' house had started innocently enough. Mom's pot roast, dad's old construction stories, a familiar comfort. Francesca predictably arrived late, Quentin trailing behind her, arms laden with shopping bags from boutiques with names I couldn't pronounce. Adrian, of course, burst in like a mini hurricane, immediately demanding dessert. Give your aunt a hug first. Francesca murmured, scrolling through her phone, her attention already elsewhere. Adrian just gave me that dismissive glance he usually reserved for a piece of furniture, then wandered off towards the kitchen. I'd stopped expecting warmth from him years ago. He was a child raised to believe the world existed solely to cater to his whims. Common courtesy, apparently beneath his station. Dinner was a blur of Quentin's latest business acquisition and Francesca's upcoming spa retreat in Arizona. Nobody asked about my promotion at work or the charity concert I'd organized for the children's ward. When Dad tried to proudly mention my recent recognition in the local paper for volunteer work, Francesca cut him off mid-sentence, pulling up photos of her resort. They have gold-plated bathroom fixtures, she gushed, zooming in on her phone. Can you imagine? I remember just nodding, a tight smile on my face, feeling that familiar, uncomfortable disconnect. It was after dinner, my guard down, that I made the mistake. I slipped out to my car to retrieve my guitar. It's a ritual, really, playing for my parents, especially Dad, who loved the old country and folk tunes. Music has always been our silent language, but this time the case felt lighter, a hollow, sickening lightness. My stomach plummeted before my brain could even register why. My hands were shaking as I carried it inside, already feeling that something was terribly, irrevocably wrong. The latches clicked open, the familiar sound a cruel counterpoint to the horror within. My vision blurred. The Gibson, my magnificent, precious Gibson, was destroyed. The neck, snapped clean off, hung at an unnatural, grotesque angle, held only by the tension of the strings. The body was a roadmap of deliberate destruction, deep gouges, aggressive scratches, as if someone had taken a metal object and carved into the polished wood with methodical malice. The headstock was cracked, tuning pegs ripped out, pieces of the abalone inlay from the fretboard. Gone, just gone. I stood there, frozen in the hallway. This wasn't an accident. This was an act of brutal, systematic violence against an inanimate object. What's wrong? Mom appeared beside me, her face draining of color as she saw the ruined instrument. Oh, honey, what happened? The commotion drew everyone. Dad's confusion morphed into a silent, simmering rage. Francesca looked mildly curious, while Quentin, annoyingly, seemed more bothered by the interruption to his after-dinner cigar. Oh, who did this? I managed to whisper, my voice barely there. Just then, Adrian strolled past, and I saw fresh scratches on his hands, and in his hand, a small, glinting Swiss Army knife. Quentin's knife, a limited edition piece worth thousands. I said slowly, every word a struggle. Did you go into my car? He shrugged. I bet it wasn't locked. I wanted to see what was inside. Did you? Did you do this to my guitar? It made funny sounds when I hit it. He replied, complete indifference in his voice. The wood was easy to scratch, too. I wanted to see what was under the shiny stuff. The room went utterly silent. I waited, my breath held tight in my chest for Francesca or Quentin to react, for any flicker of horror or even mild concern at what their son had confessed. Instead, Francesca sighed, an exasperated sigh as if I were overreacting. Adrian, you shouldn't play with other people's things, she said, in the same tone she might use to comment on the weather. That was it. That was their response. I stared at my sister, disbelief warring with a rising tide of fury. Your son just destroyed a $12,000 guitar and that's your response? Quentin actually scoffed. $12,000 for a guitar? That's absurd. Nobody pays that much for a wooden box with strings. It's a 1968 Gibson J200. I retorted, my teeth clenched. It's a collector's item, a professional instrument. Your son deliberately smashed it to pieces. He's just a child. Francesca interjected, her voice sharpening now, a defensive edge creeping in. He didn't know is expensive. You're blowing this completely out of proportion. He's 10 years old, not 3. I shot back, gesturing at the wreckage. Look at this damage. This wasn't curiosity. He systematically destroyed it. Dad stepped forward, his face beet red. That boy needs to be punished. And you two need to pay for the guitar. And then Quentin laughed, an actual, dismissive laugh. We're not paying $12,000 because your daughter is irresponsible enough to leave expensive items in an unlocked car. It was locked. I yelled, my voice cracking. I always lock my car! Clearly not, Francesca said, a smug little smile playing on her lips. Otherwise Adrian wouldn't have been able to get in. This is really your own fault for being careless. Mom gasped, clutching her chest. Francesca, how can you say that? Your son damaged her property! I'm sure she has insurance or something. Besides, she added, turning to me, a desperate plea in her eyes. You're supposed to forgive family, right? That's what you always taught us growing up. Forgiveness and family come first. Wait, let that sink in. My own mother, unwittingly, handed Francesca the perfect weapon. My family's values weaponized, twisted to dismiss accountability. Adrian, meanwhile, stood there, a smirk on his face, clearly enjoying the spectacle he'd created. He knew his parents would shield him. And in that moment, something shifted inside me. It's fascinating and, frankly, heartbreaking to witness these dynamics play out in real time. What we're seeing here isn't just about a spoiled child, it's a stark example of how enabling behavior, especially within family units, can completely erode accountability. Francesca and Quentin are exhibiting what psychologists call cognitive dissonance. They're holding two conflicting beliefs. We are good parents and our child just committed a destructive act. To resolve this uncomfortable tension, they rationalize Adrian's behavior, minimize the damage, and then crucially shift the blame. It's easier to see me as melodramatic or careless than to confront the uncomfortable truth about their son's upbringing. The bystander effect also plays a subtle role, as even my parents, who are clearly uncomfortable, struggle to act decisively against Francesca, likely due to a desire to avoid direct confrontation and maintain family harmony at all costs. This creates a vacuum where the perpetrator, Adrian, faces no real immediate consequence, reinforcing his sense of impunity. So, that's how it is. I said quietly, the rage now a cold, hard knot in my stomach. Family means I should just accept that your son destroyed something irreplaceable, and asking for basic accountability makes me the villain. You're being melodramatic, Quentin said dismissively, waving a hand. It's a guitar. Get over it. I looked at my parents, desperate for a lifeline, for some tangible support. Mom looked uncertain, pulled between her daughters. Dad, despite his initial anger, looked defeated. Francesca had always been his favorite, the daughter who'd married well, who lived the life he'd always envisioned for us both. I was the one who chose a modest career, helping people rather than chasing wealth. Fine, I said, snapping the guitar case shut, a final, definitive sound. I understand perfectly. Francesca smiled, a small, triumphant curve of her lips. I knew you'd be reasonable about this. Family has to stick together. I didn't respond. I simply picked up the case, kissed my mother's cheek, and walked out without another word. The drive home was a blur of fury and heartbreak. That guitar, my sanctuary, my identity, reduced to splintered wood, destroyed by a child for entertainment, and my own family had sided with him. My apartment felt empty when I walked in. The music room, usually a source of comfort, now mocked me with its silence. I placed the destroyed case on my workbench. Opening it again felt like performing an autopsy. But I needed proof for insurance. I documented everything, photographs from every angle, each gouge, each crack, the sickening angle of the neck, the missing inlays. Adrian hadn't just damaged it, he'd brutalized it with methodical precision. The gouges in the body even seemed to follow deliberate patterns, as if he'd been testing how deeply the knife could penetrate. My phone buzzed, a text from Mom. Please, don't be angry with your sister. She's under a lot of stress with Adrian. Maybe you could talk to her tomorrow when everyone's calmed down? My blood pressure spiked. Stress? What about my stress? The stress of working extra shifts, saving for years, only to have something deeply meaningful destroyed by a spoiled child whose parents refused to parent. What about my feelings? My loss? My right to basic respect? I didn't reply. Instead, I called my insurance company. The agent on the other end sounded sympathetic. As I explained the situation, do you have documentation of the guitar's value? Purchase receipt, authentication papers, recent appraisal? I can email everything over, I said, my voice tight. That would be helpful, she replied. I have to tell you, though, based on what you're describing, if the damage was intentional, we'll need to involve law enforcement. Deliberate destruction by a family member can complicate the claim. The child who did it is 10 years old. A pause. That does complicate things. We'll need a police report regardless. Someone will contact you within 48 hours to schedule an inspection. I hung up, the weight of the phone heavy in my hand. Filing a claim meant officially reporting Adrian's actions. It meant potential legal consequences for a 10-year-old. A part of me recoiled. He was family, after all, and so young. But another part, the one that had been dismissed and invalidated all evening, whispered that consequences were exactly what Adrian needed. His parents certainly weren't going to provide them. I pulled up my notes app and started typing every detail of the evening, every word exchanged, meticulously recorded. If this was going to be an official matter, I wanted my recollection ironclad. Around midnight, my phone rang. Francesca. I watched her name flash, letting it ring through to voicemail. She called again 5 minutes later. Then again, on the fourth attempt, I answered. What do you want? Don't hang up, please, she pleaded, her voice already taking on that whiny, manipulative tone. I need to talk to you about what happened. There's nothing to talk about. Your son destroyed my property. You refused to take responsibility. The conversation is over. You're making this into such a bigger deal than it needs to be, she insisted. Adrian feels terrible about what happened. Does he? Because he seemed pretty pleased with himself when I saw him. He's upstairs crying right now! Quentin had to take away his Xbox because he was so upset. The absurdity of it almost made me laugh. His punishment for destroying a 12,000 guitar was losing video game privileges for how long? A whole day? You don't understand how sensitive he is, she continued. Harsh punishments don't work with Adrian. We have to use positive reinforcement and natural consequences. Natural consequences, I repeated flatly. Like what? The natural consequence of smashing someone's guitar is that they get upset. How terrible for Adrian to witness the results of his own actions. See, this is exactly what I'm talking about. You're being sarcastic and mean when I'm trying to have a genuine conversation with you. Francesca, I said, my voice dropping, cold and hard. I'm going to say this once, and then I'm hanging up. Your son deliberately destroyed something that took me 3 years to save for something irreplaceable. Your response was to blame me, mock the value of what was lost, and tell me I should just get over it because family forgives. You taught Adrian tonight that actions don't have consequences as long as mommy and daddy are there to make excuses. That's not fair? I filed an insurance claim. They require a police report for intentional damage. Tomorrow, officers are going to want to talk to Adrian about what he did. The silence on the other end stretched, heavy and profound. You called the police on a 10-year-old child? I called my insurance company about a destroyed $12,000 instrument. They're the ones requiring a police report. This is what happens in the real world when you destroy other people's property. I can't believe you would do this to family. And I can't believe you're surprised. You made it clear tonight that my feelings and my loss don't matter. Well, insurance companies don't care about your excuses or your family dynamics. They care about facts and documentation. Francesca's voice rose to a near shriek. You're going to give my son a criminal record over a stupid guitar? That stupid guitar was worth more than some people make in 3 months, and Adrian won't get a criminal record. He's a juvenile first offender. But maybe, just maybe, having to talk to police officers will teach him that actions have consequences. Quentin is going to lose his mind when he hears about this. Quentin can join you in not caring what I think. I'm done with this conversation. I hung up. Immediately, I called my parents' landline. Mom answered, groggy. Honey, it's almost 1 in the morning. What's wrong? Mom, I need you to block Francesca from calling me through you and Dad. She's harassing me about the insurance claim, and I can't deal with her right now. Oh, sweetheart. Mom sighed heavily. She already called here twice. Your father told her to leave you alone and let everyone calm down. I'll make sure she knows not to use our phone to reach you. Thank you. I'm sorry for waking you. Don't apologize. Try to get some sleep, okay? After we hung up, exhaustion finally crashed over me. 32 years old, a nurse manager at a major hospital, and I'd just been reduced to asking my parents to run interference like a teenager avoiding drama. It was demoralizing. The next morning, I woke with gritty eyes and a pounding headache. Sleep had been fitful, interrupted by dreams of splintered wood and Francesca's dismissive laugh. The destroyed guitar case still sat on my workbench, a silent accusation. I made coffee and sat at my kitchen table, staring blankly. The insurance company wouldn't call for another day. The police report could wait. For now, I just needed to process. That's when the idea began to form. Not fully developed, just a whisper in the back of my mind. Francesca had said I should forgive. That family came first. That material possessions didn't matter as much as relationships. What if I applied those exact principles to something Quentin valued? What if I showed them, not with words, but with action, exactly what their philosophy looked like when reflected back? I spent the late morning researching, diving down internet rabbit holes about car detailing, temporary vandalism, and reversible damage. The goal crystallized: create the exact same level of violation and distress I'd experienced, but everything had to be technically fixable, a lesson, not genuine destruction. By noon, I had a shopping list. By 1, I'd gathered everything. My hospital shift wasn't until the next day, giving me an entire afternoon and evening to prepare. The plan was simple, calculated, and perfectly proportionate. If the low 12,000 was guitar was with bricks, then Quentin's 100,000 Mercedes was just metal and plastic with wheels. I went to bed that night with everything ready, supplies in my car trunk, timeline set. Tomorrow morning, before sunrise, I would teach my family precisely what their philosophy of consequence, free forgiveness actually looked like. The human desire for justice, or at least a sense of settling the score, is deeply ingrained. When formal systems or social dynamics fail to provide adequate consequences for perceived wrongdoing, individuals often seek alternative forms of redress. What we're seeing here is a carefully calibrated act of retributive justice. The protagonist isn't aiming for permanent destruction, but rather a symbolic mirroring of the harm inflicted. This is a crucial distinction. It moves beyond simple vengeance to a desire to educate through shared experience, forcing the perpetrators to feel a similar psychological impact. The meticulous planning to ensure the damage is reversible highlights a moral tightrope walk, seeking to inflict a lesson without causing irreparable harm, yet ensuring the lesson's impact is undeniable. It's a pragmatic, albeit emotionally driven response to a profound sense of invalidation. Quentin's Mercedes L65 AMG was his pride and joy, a 100,000 beast purchased just 6 months prior, custom ordered with specific paint and interior options. It sat in my parents' driveway, a gleaming black monument to his ego, a car he'd spent 20 minutes talking about during dinner, even scolding Adrian for getting fingerprints on the window. I woke at 5:30 a.m. Dressed in dark clothes, I drove to my parents' house. The neighborhood was silent, most people still asleep on this Sunday morning. Quentin and Francesca were staying the weekend. Mom had mentioned they'd extended their visit because Adrian wanted to use my parents' pool. I arrived at 60:15, just as the sky was beginning to lighten. Quentin's Mercedes was exactly where it had been on Friday night. I'd stopped at a hardware store late yesterday, picking up specific items. Nothing illegal, nothing that would cause permanent damage, just enough to make my point. The valve stem tool was a mere $3. Removing the caps from all 4 tires took less than a minute. Letting the air out took slightly longer, a steady hiss of escaping pressure. But I had plenty of time. The car slowly settled onto its rims, the expensive suspension compressing under the weight, a satisfying sigh of deflation. Next came the washable paint markers, the kind children use for art projects. Across the windshield, in large, bright letters, I wrote, "He's just a car. You're supposed to forgive." The hood received similar treatment. Nobody needs a 100,000 car anyway. On the driver's side door, I scrawled, "Family comes first. Get over it." The Bologna, a family-sized package, 48 slices of processed meat, was carefully placed across every painted surface. The acidity, I knew, if left long enough, would eat into the clear coat, creating permanent spots and discoloration. Quentin himself had once lectured everyone for 15 minutes at a family barbecue about protecting luxury car paint. The irony wasn't lost on me. For the final touch, the sardine oil, drained from several cans, it was poured meticulously into the air intake vents. That smell, I knew, would permeate the entire ventilation system, almost impossible to eliminate without replacing multiple components. I stepped back to admire my work. The Mercedes, once a symbol of opulence, now looked utterly ridiculous, covered in Bologna and childish messages, sitting pathetically on 4 flat tires in the early morning light. It was perfect. I drove home, showered, changed into clean clothes, and waited. My phone started ringing at 7:45. Quentin's number flashed on the screen. I didn't answer. He called 6 more times in rapid succession before Francesca tried. I ignored her. 2. Mom called next. Her voice panicked on the voicemail. "Honey, please call me back!" Quentin is absolutely furious about his car. He's threatening to call the police. "Please, we need to talk about this." I waited until noon, then I drove back to my parents' house. The scene that greeted me was exactly what I'd envisioned. Quentin stood next to his defiled Mercedes, his face a horrifying shade of purple. Francesca was crying, her perfectly applied makeup streaking down her cheeks. Dad looked torn, a strange mix of anger and something that might have been pride in his eyes. Mom wrung her hands, clearly distressed. Adrian was nowhere to be seen. Probably inside, oblivious. "You're insane," Quentin bellowed the moment he saw me. "Do you have any idea how much this is going to cost to fix?" "Fix?" I asked innocently, feigning surprise. "Why would you need to fix it? It's just a car. Nobody needs $100,000 car anyway." His face somehow turned an even deeper shade of red. "That's completely different. This is deliberate vandalism." Adrian's destruction of my guitar was deliberate too, I said calmly. I watched him show no remorse whatsoever. He's a child, Francesca shrieked. You're a grown adult who should know better. Exactly, I replied, my voice even. I am an adult who knows better. I know that actions have consequences. I know that expensive things should be respected and protected. I know that family doesn't mean accepting abuse without standing up for yourself. This is abuse. Quentin gestured wildly at his car. You destroyed my Mercedes! I haven't destroyed anything, I corrected him. The paint will wash off. The tires just need air. The Bologna might leave some spot, but nothing that can't be buffed out with enough professional attention. Unlike my guitar, which is completely beyond repair, you can buy another guitar, Francesca said desperately. But Quentin's car was custom ordered. The paint is a special color. The interior is bespoke. You can't just replace that. The irony was so thick I almost laughed out loud. My guitar was a 1968 Gibson J200. They don't make them anymore. It was irreplaceable in every sense of the word. But according to you yesterday, I said, looking her dead in the eye, I'm supposed to just forgive and forget because family comes first. Here we see a textbook case of reactive cognitive dissonance. Quentin and Francesca are now experiencing the very same psychological discomfort they inflicted on the protagonist when their previous arguments, it's just material, you should forgive, it's your own fault, are thrown back at them, applied to their valuable possession. They struggle to maintain their self-perception as reasonable, empathetic people. Their immediate, visceral rejection of these statements perfectly illustrates the human tendency to avoid hypocrisy by reframing situations when they become personally inconvenient. This mirror effect is a powerful, albeit often volatile, way to force individuals to confront the logical inconsistencies of their own moral frameworks. Mom stepped forward, her voice pleading. Can't we all just calm down and work this out? Fighting won't solve anything. There's nothing to work out, Mom, I said, my gaze steady. Yesterday, I learned that family means accepting whatever happens to you without complaint. Francesca made it very clear that asking for accountability or consequences makes you unreasonable. That's not what I said, Francesca protested weakly. Yes, it is. You said Adrian is just a child who didn't know better. You said I was being melodramatic. You said I should forgive him because family sticks together. You refused to take any responsibility for your son's actions or offer any compensation for what he destroyed. I turned to Quentin. So, I'm applying those same principles here. I'm just a person who didn't know better. You're being melodramatic about some washable paint and flat tires. You should forgive me because family sticks together. And really, this is your own fault for parking such an expensive car in an unlocked driveway where anyone could mess with it. The silence stretched, heavy and palpable. Quentin's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Francesca's tears had stopped, replaced by a dawning realization of exactly how her own words sounded when reflected back at her. This is completely different, Quentin finally managed, his voice strained. How? I challenged, leaning forward. Explain to me exactly how it's different. Cause my car is worth real money. So was my guitar. $12,000 is real money to me, even if it's pocket change to you. Actually, the insurance appraisal valued it at $18,000, but I'm only asking for what I originally paid since that seems more fair. Dad cleared his throat. She's got a point, Quentin. Stay out of this, Quentin, he snapped. Don't talk to my father that way, I said sharply. You come into his home, let your son destroy my property, refuse to take responsibility, and now you're disrespecting him when he tries to mediate. Francesca grabbed Quentin's arm. Maybe we should just go, not until she agrees to pay for the damages to my car, Quentin insisted, pulling away. I crossed my arms. I'll make you a deal. I'll pay for every cent of damage to your Mercedes if you pay for my guitar. Fair is fair. Your guitar wasn't worth $12,000, Quentin argued, but his voice had lost some of its certainty. From my purse, I pulled out the documentation I'd printed that morning, purchase receipt. authentication certificate, insurance appraisal, and recent auction results for similar instruments. I handed the papers to Quentin and watched his face pale as he reviewed them. This says it was appraised at $15,000 last year, he said weakly. Values have gone up. Vintage Gibsons in that condition are increasingly rare. The insurance company valued it at $18,000 in my current policy, but I'm only asking for the $12,000 I originally paid. Francesca snatched the papers from her husband's hands, scanning them frantically. This can't be right. Nobody pays this much for a guitar. Professional musicians do. Collectors do. People who understand the value of craftsmanship and heritage do. Just because you don't understand something doesn't make it worthless. Mom looked over Francesca's shoulder and gasped, "Oh, honey? I had no idea it was worth so much. I told you yesterday." "Mom, you chose not to believe me?" Quentin pulled out his phone, presumably to call his insurance company or a lawyer. I waited patiently while he had a heated conversation with someone about vandalism coverage and police reports. When he hung up, his expression had shifted from rage to calculation. "My insurance will cover the car repairs, but I'll have to pay a $5,000 deductible. Plus, the adjuster said the Bologna acid etching might require complete repaint, which could total the car, given its custom specifications." "That sounds expensive," I said, with feigned sympathy, almost like having something valuable deliberately destroyed is actually a big deal. "I want to press charges," Quentin stated. "Go ahead. I'll press charges against Adrian for the guitar. We can let the court sort out who owes what to whom." Francesca's face went white. "You wouldn't. He's just a child." "A child who committed felony destruction of property. In this state, the threshold for felony criminal mischief is $1,000. Adrian exceeded that by a factor of 12. Even as a juvenile, he faces serious consequences." "You're bluffing," Quentin said, but he didn't sound convinced. I pulled out my phone and opened my email. "I already spoke with a lawyer this morning. Would you like to see the consultation summary? He was very interested in the case, especially when I mentioned the parents refused to take any responsibility." "Dad stepped between us. All right, enough? This has gone too far on both sides. Has it?" I looked at my father steadily. "Because from where I'm standing, I've only done exactly what was done to me. The difference is I can undo what I did to Quentin's car. He can get it cleaned, repaired, and restored. Adrian destroyed something that can never be replaced, and nobody in this family seemed to care until it affected someone they considered important." The truth of that statement hung in the air. Mom's eyes filled with tears, and Dad's shoulders slumped. They both knew I was right. Francesca found her voice, smaller now, lacking its earlier confidence. "What do you want from us?" "I want you to understand that actions have consequences. I want you to teach your son that destroying other people's property is wrong, regardless of whether he thinks it's fun or interesting. I want an apology that actually means something, not just empty words designed to make the situation go away." "And the money?" Quentin asked, resigned. "I want my $12,000 for the guitar. You can pay it directly, or we can involve insurance companies and lawyers and police reports. Your choice." Quentin and Francesca exchanged a long look, some silent communication passing between them. Quentin pulled out his phone again. "I'll transfer the money now," he said, his voice clipped. "But this makes us even. No more revenge, no more dramatics. I'm not the one who started this," I reminded him. "But yes, payment for the guitar settles the debt." He tapped on his phone for a minute and mine buzzed with a notification. 112,000 deposited into my account. I verified the transaction before nodding. "Thank you. For what it's worth, the car damage is entirely superficial, except possibly the paint etching. Any detailing shop can handle the Bologna removal, and the paint markers are water soluble. You'll need to replace the cabin air filter because of the sardine oil, but everything else is fixable." Quentin's jaw clenched, but he didn't respond. Francesca had started crying again, though whether from relief or humiliation, I couldn't tell. "What about Adrian?" Mom asked, quietly. "Needs to understand what he did wrong. That's for his parents to handle," I said, though I added, "If I were them, I'd be seriously reconsidering the lessons he's learning about respect and consequences." Francesca wiped her eyes. I'll talk to him. Will you? Or will you tell him that his aunt is mean and unfair and that he didn't really do anything wrong? She flinched at the accuracy of my guess. I'll actually talk to him. I promise. I didn't believe her, not entirely, but that wasn't my problem anymore. I made my point in a way that couldn't be ignored or dismissed. Whether they chose to learn from it was up to them. The next few days passed in relative silence. Quentin got his Mercedes towed to a specialty detailing shop. They charged him $30,000 and for emergency paint correction and interior decontamination. The manager, he said, called it the worst case of deliberate vandalism he'd seen in 20 years. Mom reached out tentatively, asking if I wanted to come over for Sunday dinner. Just her and Dad, nobody else? I accepted, curious to hear what they really thought. Dad was grilling chicken when I arrived. Mom had made her famous potato salad and baked beans. We ate on the back patio, the same place where Adrian had probably found Quentin's knife just days earlier. Your sister is very upset? Mom said eventually, pushing beans around her plate. I imagine she is. She feels like you attacked her family, that you went after Quentin's car specifically to hurt her through him. That's exactly what I did. I agreed. Just like Adrian attacked my guitar specifically because it was mine, and he thought destroying it would be fun. Dad set down his fork. What you did was risky. If Quentin had pressed charges, you could have ended up with a criminal record. And if I pressed charges against Adrian, he would have a juvenile record. We both had leverage. The difference is I was willing to use mine. It could have blown up your whole family, Mom said softly. The family blew up the moment everyone sided with a child who deliberately destroyed my property. I just made sure the explosion hit everyone equally instead of just me. Mom's eyes filled with tears. I should have supported you better. When I saw that guitar, I knew it was serious, but Francesca started crying and saying you were trying to ruin Adrian's life, and I didn't want my daughters fighting. So you stayed neutral, which meant supporting Francesca by default, no? She whispered. I'm sorry. Dad cleared his throat. I'm not sorry you did what you did. That boy needed to learn a lesson, and his parents sure as hell weren't going to teach him. Marcus! Mom looked shocked. Oh, come on, Helen. You've been saying for years that Francesca spoils Adrian rotten. The kid has no discipline, no manners, no concept of consequences. What happened was inevitable. The only question was whose property he destroyed first. The bluntness of Dad's assessment hung in the air. Mom didn't argue, which told me she agreed, even if she didn't want to admit it. Quentin called me yesterday. Dad continued. Wanted to know if I talked to you about apologizing for the car. I told him that apologies work both ways, and until Adrian apologized to you for the guitar, he could forget about getting anything from you. What did he say? Hung up on me? Then Francesca called crying, saying I was choosing you over her and my own grandson. I told her that respecting people's property isn't about choosing sides. It's about basic human decency. A lump formed in my throat. Thank you for standing up for me. Should have done it sooner. Should have shut down Francesca's excuses the night it happened instead of letting you walk out alone. We finished dinner in more comfortable silence. As I helped clear the dishes, Mom pulled me aside. Francesca asked if you'd be willing to let Adrian apologize. In person, with both parents present. Why? So they can control what he says and make sure it's appropriately sanitized? Maybe, but maybe it's also a genuine attempt at making things right. I considered the request. Part of me wanted to refuse purely out of spite, but refusing would make me just as stubborn and unreasonable as Quentin. Fine, I said. But it happens here at your house, with you and Dad present. I don't trust Francesca not to turn it into some ambush where I'm supposed to apologize to Adrian for traumatizing him. That's fair, Mom agreed. The apology meeting was scheduled for the following Saturday. I arrived early, wanting to talk with my parents before Francesca's family showed up. Dad made coffee while I sat at the kitchen table, trying to calm my nerves. You don't have to do this if you're not ready, he said, sliding a mug across to me. I'm not sure I'll ever be ready, but avoiding them forever isn't realistic either. Francesca's BMW pulled up exactly on time. Through the window, I watched her and Quentin have what appeared to be an intense conversation with Adrian in the back seat. The boy looked sullen, arms crossed, staring out the window with an expression that suggested this whole exercise was beneath him. They came inside with the energy of people attending a funeral. Adrian dragged his feet, and Quentin kept a hand on the boy's shoulder like he might both if given the chance. "Thank you for agreeing to this," Francesca said stiffly. I nodded but didn't respond. We all moved to the living room, arranging ourselves like opposing legal teams. Adrian sat between his parents on the couch while I took the armchair across from them. Mom and Dad positioned themselves as neutral observers near the fireplace. Adrian has something he wants to say, Quentin prompted, nudging his son. The boy looked at the floor. "I'm sorry I broke your guitar." The words came out flat, rehearsed, completely devoid of actual remorse. I waited to see if there was more, but Adrian remained silent, clearly believing he'd fulfilled his obligation. "Why are you sorry?" I asked. Adrian looked confused. "Because my parents said I have to be." "That's not what I asked. I asked why you're sorry." "Do you understand what you did wrong?" He shrugged. "I shouldn't have touched your stuff without asking." Another shrug. The kid genuinely didn't see the problem beyond getting caught. Francesca jumped in. "He knows it was expensive and that you worked hard to buy it, talked extensively about respecting other people's property." "Have you?" "Because he doesn't seem to have internalized any of that." "He's apologizing, isn't he? What more do you want?" "I want him to actually understand. Adrian, do you have anything you care about? Video games? Toys? Anything?" "I guess," he mumbled. "What would you do if someone took your favorite thing and deliberately smashed it while laughing?" He thought about it for maybe 3 seconds. "I'd be mad." "Just mad? Not hurt? Not betrayed? Not devastated?" "I could just buy another one." There it was, the fundamental disconnect. In Adrian's world, everything was replaceable because money was infinite. The concept of something being irreplaceable, of having sentimental or historical value beyond its price tag, was completely foreign to him. Adrian's response here is a textbook example of the entitlement complex, often fostered by permissive or overindulgent parenting. When a child is consistently given everything they desire without having to earn it and shielded from the natural consequences of their actions, they develop a distorted understanding of value, effort, and empathy. For Adrian, loss is easily remedied by buying another one because he hasn't experienced the personal sacrifice, emotional attachment, or effort that imbues an object with true worth beyond its monetary cost. This lack of object permanence for emotional value, combined with a severe empathy deficit, indicates a child who is dangerously ill equipped to navigate the complexities of interpersonal relationships and societal expectations. His parents, by not holding him accountable earlier, have inadvertently nurtured these traits. "My guitar was made in 1968, I said slowly. "Before your parents were born, before your grandparents were married. It was played by professional musicians in recording studios. It had history and character and a sound that came from decades of being played and loved." "You can't just buy another one." "Then why did Quentin have to pay you $12,000 if you can't replace it?" Adrian challenged. The kid was smarter than he acted. He'd found the logical hole in my argument and driven straight through it. "Because the money represents the value of what was lost, even if that value can't truly be replaced. Like if someone destroyed your house, insurance would pay you money, but it wouldn't give you back the specific house with all your memories attached to it." "We could buy a bigger house," Adrian said. Quentin closed his eyes in frustration. Francesca looked like she wanted to disappear into the couch cushions. Even they could see that their son was incapable of grasping the basic concept of sentimental value. "This isn't working," I said to Francesca. "He doesn't understand, and forcing him to apologize isn't teaching him anything." "What do you suggest?" she asked desperately. "We've taken away privileges. We've had him talk to a therapist. We've tried explaining why what he did was wrong. Nothing seems to get through." I finished for her because he's never experienced real loss. Everything in his life is replaceable. Every mistake is fixable with money. Every consequence is temporary. Dad spoke up from his position by the fireplace. When I was Adrian's age, I saved up for 6 months to buy a model airplane kit. Took every penny from my paper route. The day I finished building it, my older brother knocked it off the shelf and it shattered. My parents made him pay for a replacement out of his allowance, but that took him almost a year. Dad continued, a whole year of not being able to buy anything else because he owed me for what he'd broken. He learned real quick to be more careful around other people's stuff. Adrian perked up slightly at the story, maybe because it involved actual consequences that another child had faced. Could you do something like that? Mom asked Francesca. Make him save or work to understand the value? He's 10 years old. What kind of work could he do? Quentin drawled. Chores, yard work, helping neighbors. I suggested. Not to pay me back, you already did that, but to learn what effort and time feel like when you're working towards something. We're not making our son into child labor, Quentin scoffed. No, I countered, my voice firm. You're making your son into someone who destroys other people's property for entertainment. I'm trying to help you fix that before he's old enough for the consequences to involve jail instead of family discussions. The room fell silent. Adrian looked between his parents, perhaps sensing for the first time that this was about more than just the guitar. I'm going to leave now, I announced. Mom, Dad, I love you both. I'm sorry this happened in your home, but I'm not sorry for standing up for myself. Dad hugged me tightly. Don't apologize. You did what needed doing. I should have backed you up yesterday instead of staying quiet. Mom joined the embrace. Can we still see you for holidays and birthdays? Of course, I'm not cutting you out of my life, but I won't be attending events where Adrian is present until I see genuine evidence that he's learned consequences for his actions. Francesca started to protest, but Quentin stopped her with a hand on her shoulder. For once, he seemed to understand that pushing further would only make things worse. I drove away from my parents' house, feeling lighter than I had in years. Though $12 wouldn't bring back my guitar, but it would allow me to search for another vintage instrument worthy of my collection. More importantly, I'd established a boundary that had been missing from my family dynamics for far too long. 2 weeks later, Dad called to tell me Francesca had enrolled Adrian in counseling. Apparently, his behavior at school had been escalating, and the guitar incident had been the wake-up call his parents needed to recognize they were raising a child with serious empathy deficits. The therapist said he shows signs of conduct disorder. Dad explained something about lack of remorse and disregard for others' feelings. They're working on it, but it's going to take a time. I hope they stick with it, I said honestly. Adrian deserves the chance to become a better person. Francesca asked if you'd be willing to meet for coffee. Just the two of you? I considered the request. Part of me wanted to refuse, to maintain distance from a sister who had betrayed my trust so thoroughly. But another part remembered a girl who'd shared a bedroom with me growing up, who'd braided my hair and taught me to ride a bike. Tell her I'll think about it. A month after the Mercedes incident, I met Francesca at a cafe downtown. She looked tired, older somehow, as if the past few weeks had aged her. Thank you for coming, she said quietly. You said you wanted to talk? She stirred her coffee nervously. I owe you an apology, a real one, not just words to make the situation go away. I waited, letting her find her own words. I've spent the last month in therapy with Adrian and separately in couples counseling with Quentin. The therapist asked me to think about why I reacted the way I did when Adrian destroyed your guitar, and I realized I've been so focused on maintaining this perfect image, the successful marriage, the luxury lifestyle, the well-behaved child, that I stopped seeing reality. Adrian isn't well-behaved, he's spoiled and entitled and completely lacking in empathy. Quentin and I created that by refusing to hold him accountable for anything. She took a shaky breath. When Adrian smashed your guitar, some part of me knew it was serious, but admitting that would mean admitting we'd failed parents. It was easier to blame you for overreacting than to face what our son had become. That must have been hard to realize. It was devastating, But what you did to Quentin's car, as much as I hated it at the time, gave me a perspective I desperately needed. You showed me exactly how our behavior looked from the outside. I sipped my coffee, letting her continue. The therapist says Adrian has a long road ahead of him. We've started implementing consequences at home, and he's learning that his actions affect other people. It's not easy. He fights us constantly. Change rarely is easy. I know I can't undo what happened to your guitar, but I want you to know that I see now how wrong I was. Not just about the guitar, but about everything. The way I dismissed your feelings, the way I used the family as an excuse for bad behavior, the way I prioritized wealth and status over basic human decency. The apology sounded genuine, spoken with a raw honesty that comes from real self reflection rather than social obligation. I appreciate you saying that, I told her, and I hope you and Quentin can help Adrian become the person he's capable of being. Do you think we can rebuild our relationship eventually? I thought about it carefully. Maybe. But it's going to take time, and it's going to require consistent action, not just words. Show me that you've changed through how you live, and we'll see where that leads. Francesca nodded, understanding that I wasn't offering immediate forgiveness, but rather the possibility of future reconciliation. It was more than she deserved, and we both knew it. 6 months later, I found a 1965 Gibson J200 at an estate sale in Nashville. The seller's father had been a session musician, playing with country music's biggest names. The guitar had been maintained perfectly, and the sound, it was everything I'd hoped for. It cost me 14,000, but with the money from Quentin, plus my savings, I could afford it. I invited my parents to my apartment for a private concert, just the three of us. Dad cried when I played the first song, Mama's favorite, a tune from when I was a child. The music filled the room with warmth and memory, proof that some things destroyed could be replaced, even if the replacement came in a different form. Francesca and Adrian weren't there, and that was okay. Some relationships needed space to heal, and some lessons took years to fully learn. What mattered was that I'd stood up for myself, established boundaries, and refused to accept mistreatment in the name of family obligation. The new Gibson became my constant companion, accompanying me to charity events and hospital visits where I played for patients who needed beauty in their darkest moments. Each note reminded me that standing up for yourself doesn't make you petty or vindictive. It makes you someone who understands their own worth and refuses to settle for less than basic respect. This whole experience taught me something profound about the true cost of forgiveness without accountability. It's not just about what you lose materially, but what you lose of yourself when you allow others to diminish your worth. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone, even family, is to hold them accountable. It's the only path towards genuine growth for them and for yourself. The golden rule often gets twisted in family dynamics, but I learned that sometimes to truly respect others, you must first demand respect for yourself, and that includes showing others the impact of their actions through a lens they can finally understand. It's about finding a way to transform personal violation into a powerful, albeit painful, lesson for everyone involved. And if anyone ever asks about the matching scar on both my guitars, the one destroyed and the one that replaced it, I have a story worth telling, a story about the real cost of blind forgiveness and the invaluable lesson of personal boundaries. So, I have to ask, was my retaliation justified, or did I simply stoop to their level? Where do you draw the line between seeking justice and engaging in petty revenge, especially when it comes to family? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I'm reading all of them.